From Hyderabad to Mumbai to Bhopal, protests in multiple cities in our country. Members of the Muslim community coming out on the road in protest against Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and his pushback against radical Islamic terror. Why should Indian Muslims, or at least some Indian Muslims, be protesting against what is patently a case of out-and-out terrorism, which has to be kept away from religion? Why bring religion into what is very clearly a terror attack? That is my top focus on the Newstrack.
Anti-France fury in India. Protests over prophet cartoons. No agitation against beheadings. Anti-extremism is equal to Islamophobia. Top focus on Newstrack.
You know, innocent bystanders are being attacked and killed, and the people who are protesting are not protesting against those who are being attacked. Rather, they are protesting in favor, seemingly, of the attackers and against those who want to punish the attackers. And remember, France is one of our closest allies, a deep strategic ally, a valuable friend of India, and yet these protests against the French president and the French nation. We'll do a deep dive on the news. Hardens its position against radical Islam after a series of terror attacks and beheadings. Protests rage on against Emmanuel Macron. Anti-France fury erupted in India today, with Muslim groups protesting against the depiction of the Prophet Muhammad in cartoons. India has officially declared that it stands firmly with France in this war against terrorism. Are these protesters serving the interests of radical Islamic hardliners? Why are they not speaking up for those who were beheaded, those who were attacked? Why speak up and protest in favor of the attackers?
Islamophobia down, 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 down. Islamophobia
Fury.
Down, 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 down.
Protests and fire. From Srinagar to Hyderabad, Bhopal to Mumbai, Muslim groups took to the streets against the French President Emmanuel Macron. The reason for their rage, not the beheadings or terror, but cartoons depicting Prophet Muhammad in France. In Bhopal, Congress MLA Arif Masood led thousands in protest at Iqbal Maidan, demanding that India snap all financial ties with France.
हमने कभी किसी के धर्म के बारे में बुरा नहीं कहा, तो हमारे मजहबी पेशवा के बारे में, हमारे नबी के बारे में गुस्ताखी करने का किसी को हक हासिल नहीं है। और अगर फ्रांस के राष्ट्रपति ने कार्टून के ऊपर टिप्पणी करी है, तो हमने उसका विरोध करा है और शांतिपूर्वक विरोध करा है।
Posters of French President lined a busy road near JJ flyover in Mumbai, with cars and pedestrians running over Macron's face.
President मैक्रोन ने जो नबी करीम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की तौहीन की है, वो मुसलमानों को बर्दाश्त नहीं है। आज पूरी दुनिया जो है, पूरी दुनिया के मुसलमान मैक्रोन के खिलाफ एहतजाज कर रहे हैं, उनके सामान का बायकाट कर रहे हैं।
Protesters marched with posters slamming Macron for defending the rights to publish cartoons of the Prophet, surfaced in Aligarh, Hyderabad and Srinagar too.
इसकी सख्तरीन अल्फाज में मजम्मत होगी और मुसलमान खतई बर्दाश्त नहीं करेगा और फ्रांस को मुसलमान माशी तौर पर उनको जग देगा और तमाम दुनिया के मुसलमान फ्रांस के प्रोडक्ट्स का बाइकाट करेंगे, इस तरह अपना एहतजाज मुनज़्ज़म करेंगे।
हम आलम इस्लाम और हिंदुस्तान के मुसलमानों से ये अपील भी करते हैं कि फ्रांस की जितनी भी मसनूआत हैं उन तमाम ही मसनूआत का आलम इस्लाम भी और हिंदुस्तान के तमाम ही मुसलमान बाइकाट करें और उससे अपना रिश्ता और ताल्लुक खत्म करें।
हम उसकी पूरी मजम्मत करते हैं और हम बिल्कुल कतई बर्दाश्त नहीं करेंगे कि अगर हमारे नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के खिलाफ कोई इस तरीके का कुछ करेगा, चाहे वो कोई भी कंट्री हो।
Anti-Macron protests erupted days after India expressed solidarity with France after a teacher was beheaded in Paris. India has unequivocally expressed that it stands with France in the fight against terrorism.
The world will have to acknowledge that this kind of radicalization and senseless killing. Therefore, we should appeal for peace and calm. I do understand the religious sensibility should also be respected. But under no circumstances you can condone senseless killing of innocent people praying in a church or teacher in a school. No, not acceptable.
The ruling BJP too has slammed the personal attacks, posters and protests against Emmanuel Macron.
You would have seen our statement yesterday where we strongly deplored the personal attacks in unacceptable language on President Macron. And we believe that there is no justification for terrorism for any reason or under any circumstance.
France has witnessed 3 terror attacks in the last 2 months. Just yesterday, a woman was beheaded by a man chanting Allahu Akbar in the French town of Nice. The rise of radical Islam has prompted the French government to harden its stand.
Il y a dans cet islamisme radical, puisque c'est le cœur du sujet,
radical Islamism is the center topic, so let's talk about it. There is a desire openly stated by a methodical organization which aims to break the rules of the French Republic and to create a parallel order with other values, nurturing a different organization for society.
Séparatiste dans un premier temps, mais dont le but final est de prendre le contrôle complet celui-ci.
France has made it clear that it won't tolerate radical Islam. Will those protesting stand in solidarity against terrorism and extremism? Bureau Report, India Today.
Why are these protesters in India not protesting the beheadings, the brutal killings, radical Islamic terror? Why come out in support of the attackers? Why attack the French president or ask for a boycott of French goods? Joining me on the Newstrack, I want to welcome first Sebastian Farsis, correspondent with Radio France International. With us on this broadcast is Dr. Wail Awad. He's worked with Al Arabiya Television, understands what's happening in the larger Islamic world. Parajita Sarangi is the national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party. We've got Ilyas Shafruddin, he's an Islamic scholar. And I want to go across to Ilyas Shafruddin first. I don't even understand why some Muslims in India want to go out and protest against radical Islam. Why are they not protesting against the beheadings, against these brutal killings? Why come out and attack Macron, who is attacking radical terrorism? You say that terrorism has nothing to do with religion, terrorism has nothing to do with Islam. This is the perfect opportunity to prove that. You should have been protesting, if at all, against those who beheaded and killed innocent Frenchmen rather than those who are trying to protect their country. Ilyas Shafruddin.
Rahul, I would like to state 2 points in this particular matter. The first point is there is no smoke without fire. Someone has lit the fire and then the smoke starts coming out. And that person is no other than Macron himself, the president of France. He was the one who have put the cartoons of Prophet, peace be upon him, on various buildings. And he was the one who instigated the emotions of 2 billion Muslims around the world by dishonoring the Prophet. No one should take the law in their own hands. But it doesn't mean that in the name of freedom of expression, you start dishonoring Allah, Rasulullah, or any other deity of any religion. When the France have discredited the Hindu god and goddesses by printing their images on footwear as well as on toilets. We Muslims have condemned even that also. And today also we are condemning what is being done by Macron in the name of freedom of expression.
One second, sir. One second. So, Shafruddin, you are condemning what President Macron is doing, but what about condemning the beheadings and these brutal killings? You know, you're chanting the name of Allah and you're attacking in the name of Allah, running into whether it's a church or a building, killing, beheading. You know, that is wrong and that needs to be condemned. Why is no one protesting against that?
See, we are stating since last no less than 25 years, no youth should take the law in their own hands and attack any innocent. It is completely un-Islamic. If any punishment is being given, that is being given by the government, not by the individual.
But nobody protested against the beheadings.
Totally
not one of these people who were protesting, whether it's in Hyderabad, Bhopal, Delhi, Aligarh Muslim University, nobody spoke against the beheadings. They're all protesting against what the French president is doing. And the French president is saying, I will take on radicalism no matter which religion it belongs to.
Exactly. You might have missed that between the lines, but I would like to state that we as individual as well as organization, along with my teacher, Dr. Zakir Naik, have condemned these acts since last no less than 3 decades almost. And today also I'm doing on your channel. Whoever have done that should be punished. Either the nice church attack or the whatever the other attacks should be punished, along with all the crimes done by the French president and the French government in the past. That is killing 15 million Al-Jazair Muslims also.
Sebastian Farsis, there seems to be a ferment in the Muslim world against France. Calls for boycotting French products, the French nation, and especially the French president growing louder. How is France looking at the backlash from the likes of Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia, who justified the killing of French people, to these protests, to what's happening in Turkey, where the president has said that Macron's gone mad, needs to get his mental condition checked. There's a violent pushback, not just in France, but world over.
The only thing I can say, I cannot speak in behalf of the French government also, of course, but what I see is a very political move, whether by the Muslim clerics or, of course, by the Muslim leaders like in Turkey. It's a political move. Why targeting Macron? I'm answering to what has just been said. What is the crime of Mr. Macron? He is not the one publishing. We have a freedom of expression. If today India Today magazine or the Times of India publishes a cartoon, news, are we going to accuse Mr. Modi of such act? It's not the case. We're not committing any crime by publishing any cartoon in France. We don't have a blasphemy law. And I want to say one thing, is that Islam is today a religion of France. And Islam is not above the law. And therefore, since we don't have any blasphemy law in France, Islam has to respect, for whatever it is, the law of the land. And we're not even talking of the Muslim in France. Most of the Muslims don't even have a problem with these cartoons. Why don't we see any protest in France, but outside of France? Today, the problem we have is with a few, very few, not even a group, but very few individuals which happen to be actually recent immigrants of Muslim countries, which just attack French people. So I think all of that is really targeted as a political move against a leader, which himself, and I want to say that Mr. Macron hasn't even mentioned.
You make an important point, Maulana Fayaz Ahmed Barkati. It's not as if President Macron is saying, oh, these guys did a great job by publishing the cartoon. He's broken no law himself. And I think Sebastian Farses makes a very important point. Islam is not above the law. Muslims have to respect the law of the land in France. And there is no blasphemy law. And therefore, French personnel are within their rights as citizens of their country to publish a cartoon against anyone, whether it's the Prophet Muhammad or Jesus Christ or any person they want to, or any God they want to. That's the law, and Islam's not above the law. Maulana Barkati?
ठीक है सर.
Can you hear me? Let me get Ilyas Shafruddin to answer that question. Islam is not above the law. Muslims have to respect the law of the land, and the law of France says that there is no blasphemy law, and those who carried and published the cartoon were well within their rights to do so.
Rahul, I would like to state the double standards of the French freedom of expression. When the Turkish Prime Minister have said that Macron needs a mental treatment, they brought back the French ambassador from Turkey and have stated a strong protest against that. When they are not ready to listen a single statement against the French president, how come French government expect the Muslims, 2 billion Muslims, to hear whatever they like and see whatever they like about our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? It is not at all possible. There has to be certain limits, Lakshman Rekha, for everyone to abide. Allah says in the Quran, do not revile the gods of other religions, lest in ignorance they may revile Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the law of Islam. We should not revile the deities of any religion. That has to be taken into consideration by the Western government. Any law which they are having on their land, they need to make
Sebastian Farsis, before I go across to the other guest, he's questioning why the French ambassador to Turkey was called back when he spoke out, when the leader of the country spoke out against Emmanuel Macron, saying, if you can't take an attack on your leader, how can we accept an attack on the Prophet Muhammad?
We are not killing anyone. We're just calling back an ambassador. That's just the sovereign right of the country. The answer is very weird in that case, that because you feel offended, you defend the right of someone to kill someone else and to commit a crime. And against that, you say, look, you do the same, you just recall an ambassador. I think the answer is clear. I mean, there's no parallel to both actions.
Wailawad, you look at what's happening in Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Turkey, elsewhere. What are you making of the kind of backlash that's been seen? Emmanuel Macron has broken no law, he's committed no crime, yet there are protests raging against him, and none of these protesters seem to be speaking out vocally. When I question and press, of course they'll say, yeah, the killing is not okay, but that's not what is provoking them to protest.
Well, I think there are two issues here, Rahul, we have to focus. First of all, the crime against the French citizen, it's a crime against the humanity. It's a terrorist act, and we condemn it by all means. And these people don't represent me or any of our faith, belong to the faith of Islam, first of all. The second part of it is the freedom of speech. Recently, there was a ruling by the European Court that there is no link between despising any religious figure and the freedom of speech. So when the people, if the French president left it to the people to condemn, I am sure there will be hundreds and millions of people condemning the act of terrorism against a French citizen by a French people. That is for sure. But when a president of a country takes the decision on his own to take on the second largest religion in his own country, it's definitely, it has a political motive behind it. Therefore, that is the whole issue of Mr.
No, but why
Macron
should he not take on radical Islamism? What's the problem with that? No. If there are going to be terrorists in his country who attack and behead and kill people, some of them completely innocent, not involved with the provocation at all, why should the president of that country not go out and say, I am not okay with this terrorism, I will punish whoever is responsible and the ideology that propagates these attacks?
That is the responsibility of the president, but it's not the responsibility of the president to justify republishing of a cartoon which is done against the prophet. There are 2 billion people across the world who respect him, who feel he has been even accepted and respected and selected by God. We should respect. That's the whole issue. We should not despise any other people. I mean, 2500 BC, our country, in our Palmyra, we had people who have written and that don't despise the God you don't worship. So it is not, we should not despise people of other worship. I wanted to remind you of yours, Rahul. In 2005, there was a French company called Manili, have made the shoes of Lord Ram on the shoes. What they have done? They removed the shoes from the market. They apologized to the Hindu community. So if you are hurting the community people on their religion, you should know that these are sentiment of the people you should respect. I'm not defending any of radicalism. Both sides are equally guilty. I know I am from Syria. I have not seen how much they suffer. When Charlie Hebdo happened, I was the first one to go to the French ambassador in Delhi. I condoled, and the Francis remembered that. We had a speech. We had discussed the matter also in the club, on the Foreign Correspondent Club. We have agreed. But you should not ridicule some figure of Islamic figure because you wanted to gain a political mileage. That is the whole point here.
Sebastian Farsis, the charge against Macron seeking to gain political mileage: don't despise the God you don't worship, don't ridicule hurting the community, respect the sentiments of 2 billion people. Respond to that, Sebastian.
We have to understand two different things. One is the freedom of expression, and yes, it is the freedom of press, and the freedom of being able to criticize religion and in a way to create satire, and that's the right of Charlie Hebdo. And on the other side is a political leader who accepts that right and guarantees that right. I don't see where Macron has published officially, or the government of France has described it as a political or public policy to despise or to criticize the Prophet Muhammad. It's not the policy of the French government to do so. It's the policy of the French government to defend the basic of secularism in France. And I do agree that France is the best target for any leader in the Muslim world. We want to gather support of his Muslim population against the common enemy, which is secularism, which is the West, which is a very good enemy to unite his own population. That's what we see with Erdogan. He's in a very bad political situation, and therefore he attacks France. France is the best enemy when we want to gather an Islamic policy. It's the DNA of France is secularism. Of course, it's not very pleasant for many Muslim leaders who don't accept secularism, but I'm sorry, this is our right to be secular.
Okay, Parajita Sarangi, now India has come out in very strong support of the French president, and of course France is a very, very close strategic ally of India. But explain the rationale at a time when there is so much protest in the Muslim world, coming out so strongly in support of the French president. Explain the rationale behind the public position taken by the government of India and your party. Aparajita.
Namaskar. On the occasion of Eid, I would first of all convey my warm greetings to all. Any religion, whichever it is, should actually aim at promotion of peace, harmony and brotherhood. No religion can ever encourage killings. We are not talking of beheadings. We are not talking of killings. And in fact, we started this entire discourse after listening to the person from the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. We strongly condemn the attacks in very unacceptable language on President Emmanuel Macron, which of course goes against the basic standards of international discourse. We strongly condemn the brutal killings of a teacher and 3 persons in the church who were extremely innocent. And we offer our condolences to the bereaved families. This is one part. Number 2, I would definitely like to reiterate that our Prime Minister has conveyed very clearly that we stand completely in this moment of grief, in this moment of disturbance, with France, with the French people, and with the President of France. In fact, we completely support the President's move in this direction. And when the President says that Islam is a religion in crisis, I think, this is my personal opinion, that all of us should come out and say that, yes, it is. This is not the meaning of a religion. I think Islamic religion has become synonymous with terrorism. You know, today in Pakistan, on the floor of the House in the Parliament, in fact, a minister of the cabinet says that, yes, one of the good works that we have done is that we have done Pulwama. So Pulwama attack was engineered by Pakistan. We have been telling it all through. Nobody was believing us. And today on the floor of the Parliament in Pakistan, this has come out. So what about these countries, this Islamic onslaught? Why won't the President
Maulana Fayaz Ahmad Barkati respond to that?
Stand with the people of France. Stand with the people of France.
The point is, Emmanuel Macron is not speaking up in favor of making fun of the Prophet. He's speaking up for the right to freedom of expression, the right for a cartoonist to do satire. He's speaking up in defense of secularism, because secularism is in France's DNA. And the charge is some of these Muslim leaders, because they're facing internal backlash in their countries like Turkey, are doing this to rally their own crowds. Maulana Barkati.
I fully agree. In fact, a minister of...
Maulana Barkati.
Dr. Weil had presented a very balanced view about this, and I appreciate his words. See, France has a very evil history of killing millions of Jews, and this has been their tradition of instigating and provocating, then blaming. What we expected from President Macron was that...
Okay, I think you got a speaker on at the back. Can I just ask you to turn that off, and then I'll come back to you. You got a speaker on at the back. Just turn that off. In the meanwhile, Ilyas Shafruddin respond to the charge that he's not speaking up supporting the satirical cartoonist. He's speaking up in support of freedom of expression. He's defending the right to satire, which, as the president of a country like France, which has secularism in its DNA, where religion and state and politics are separate, is what Emmanuel Macron has sworn to do.
See, Rahul, 2 points I would like to state. One, a media house is making satirical cartoons. Again, it is condemnable. But when a government make it a policy to use those cartoons to hurt the sentiments of 2 billion people around the world, then it becomes very dangerous, and it is like playing with fire, even against Muslims or Hindus or elsewhere. That should not have been done. When Amazon and France or England or America have tried to play around with the religious emotions of Hindus by putting the deities of Saraswati and Lakshmi on toilet, we condemned even that also. And second point, Islam is the solution for the world crisis, right from gang rapes from India, murders of girls in India, feticide, poverty, hunger, all the problems. Islam can give perfect solution to crisis of the world. The only thing is, let us be unbiased and cross-examine it. The GDP will be again plus 28 from minus 24. And the third point is, radicalization present everywhere. India became Lynchistan under a particular government thanks to radicalization of RSS. RSS was banned by Vallabhbhai Patel thanks to radicalization of Sanghis. Likewise, France have killed more than 15 million Muslims in Aljazair under secular France. That is radicalization of France. Europe and America have killed millions of Muslims recently in various countries. That is radicalization of the West. So radicalization exists everywhere.
Aparajita Sarangi, Ilyas Shafruddin saying
examine what is right and wrong and what is
that if the same protesters were to mock Indian gods, there'd be anger, protests and fury in India as well. How do you respond to Ilyas Shafruddin?
I would just say that they should set their home right. They should look into their cupboards and they should see how many skeletons are there inside. In fact, they should not confuse that they are actually following a religion, and I'm sure this particular religion does not teach them to indulge in such kind of killings. This is absolutely inhuman, and I think they should set their home right. As I told, I would be reiterating that. Now, let me tell you, this is all an expression, the way these Islamic countries are behaving with all regards for them. I would say whatever the behavior that's being displayed by them is actually an expression of the kind of internal disturbances that are there in these countries. So they don't know what to do. I mean, I'll just give you an example today. I'm sorry, I'm again going to Pakistan. Pakistan suddenly shoots a letter saying that its ambassador to Paris, to France, is recalled. because of this happening. And then thereafter they realize that they have absolutely no ambassador in Pakistan, in Paris. There is no Pakistan ambassador, but they have shot a letter, they have issued an order. What I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to convey is that these Islamic countries are extremely disturbed. They don't know what they are doing. They are actually indulging in tremendous amount of terrorism. They have created lots of disturbances in our country. And I would definitely like to mention here with all conviction at my command that our religion and we people here, we are very much in support of peace all over the world.
So French President Macron has declared that he stands for free speech and will not stop publishing any of these cartoons. But France's troubled ties with Islam are rooted in history, from banning religious symbols in schools to prohibiting the burqa in public. Flashpoints have often been followed by deadly terror attacks.
A clash of civilizations. The Muslim world in rage against France in Europe. The backlash fueled by President Emmanuel Macron's support for the right to show caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad.
Samuel Paty fut tué parce que les islamistes veulent notre futur et qu'ils savent qu'avec des héros tranquilles tels que lui, ils ne l'auront jamais.
His comments sparked Muslim outrage because any kind of visual depiction of the Prophet is prohibited in Islam. Home to around 5 million Muslims, mostly of North African origin, France's troubled ties with Islam are rooted in history. Remember, the French brand of secularism hinges on a 1905 law that originally separated the state from church. Unlike the way the notion is practiced in many other democracies, including the US, the UK or India, secularism in France does not encourage overt display of religion in public offices. The right to offend is much protected as the right to free speech. For defenders of the French notion of secularism, the notion ensures that public space remains free of religion. For opponents, the concept encourages attacks on visible diversities in public space. Flashpoints erupted in the early 2000s. France prohibited religious symbols in French schools and government buildings in 2004. In 2010, it outlawed a face veil or niqab or a burqa in public places. At the same time, France has also suffered deadly terror attacks. The turning point being the assault in January 2015 on the Paris office of Charlie Hebdo that left 12 people dead. The same year, jihadists struck outside a national stadium, Paris cafes and a concert hall in what was the deadliest attack of its kind in French history. Divisions deepened this month. An 18-year-old man of Chechen origin beheaded a 47-year-old teacher northwest of Paris for having shown students prophet cartoons as part of a class on freedom of speech.
Permettre, je l'espère, je le crois, de construire un islam des Lumières dans notre pays. C'est-à-dire un islam qui puisse être en paix avec la République.
Defense and defiance of French secularism on a global scale. Bureau Report, India Today.
You know, where will the protests go from here? Maulana Fayaz Ahmad Barkati, you know, will there be a realization, as Parajita Sarangi is calling for, that you have to look at what's wrong, look at why there's such violence response, and speak against those responsible for the beheading, instead of making it seem as if the entire world is out at war with Islam, which is clearly not the case. Maulana Barkati.
See, what I have seen from the French President Emmanuel Macron, that instead of damage control, when this happened, I have already told this, that those cartoons which were published by Charlie Hebdo in 12 years back, what was the necessity, and it took a toll. There was a terrorist attack, there was a loss of life, there was a loss of life, and many innocents were killed. And after 12 years, again you have committed the same mistake of trying to blaspheme the Prophet of Islam, trying to show disrespect and dishonor him, and so much so that now it has entered into your education system, it has entered into your classroom. Now the children, what you are teaching to caricature and to mock at the Prophet and to make his cartoon and depict him in a negative way, how can Muslims tolerate this? It is false to say that France, there is the secularism is in the DNA of France. But the history says that France has been very brutal and very has a very evil history of killing and oppressing
Sebastian
people.
Farsis, this is the point again. So you've got free speech on the one side, you've got sentiment on the other. The point again being made is that there are 2 billion people, many of whom are offended, and they want these cartoonists at Charlie Hebdo, they want the French people, the French nation, and the French president to respect their sentiments.
The whole world knows that the visual depiction of
Mr.
Prophet
Barakati,
Muhammad or any other
great
personality of Islam is not allowed,
very good.
and is
Yeah,
not
very good.
tolerable in
Mr.
Islam.
Barakati, I hear you offended.
Isn't it instigation? Isn't it a provocation?
May you please let me speak? Can we have at least this debate? Yeah. Okay. So I hear that you feel offended, and I respect that you feel offended by these publications. But have you seen any protests of Muslims in France? We don't know exactly the numbers because in France we don't do surveys on religion, based on religion. But yes, 4 to 5 million Muslims in France. Have you seen any protests right now?
Okay, one second, Mr. Barkati. I cannot allow this to turn into a street protest or degenerate to the level of a banana republic. His fader will go down. He cannot speak at a time when another guest is speaking. Let Sebastian Farsis make his point, please.
So I just want to make my point that Islam is actually a religion that crosses borders. And I do understand that people in India can be offended, people in Turkey can be offended, and I do value that right to be offended. But we have rules and laws which are above religion today. We are not in theocratic world. Therefore, the rules, again, and I'm repeating it, the rules apply to a country, and the Muslim people in France are French and Muslim, and they accept that. You will ask, I ask you to talk to French Muslims. Do they actually have a problem? The ones who are attacking, sadly, are the ones who are recent immigrants. And of course, maybe might not understand. We just have been radicalized otherwise. So again, I'm saying this.
So you make an important point, Dr. Wail Awad. Sebastian Farsis says, why are there no protests by Muslims in France? Because by and large, the large majority understands, respects, and has benefited from secularism in that country.
Well, I am critical for both the side, the Western world and the Islamic world, by the way. I'm not favoring anyone because both of them are playing in the hand of extremism, and extremism is based on the ignorance and mobilization, and these kind of protests definitely will not go into it will cause more of radicalism and all. But I think the French people understand the sentiment and the secular France, and I know that France is one of the countries which have been a victim of terrorism. I have no doubt about it. But when you tell me when there are 2,500 French terrorists come to my country, you call them freedom fighter, you refuse to take them back, you take their nationalities, why you allow them to go for political Islam in the Arab world, in the Arab Spring, when you are denying when you deny the religion, you separated the religion from politics 200 years ago in Europe. That is the message I'm trying to say here. What I'm saying is you encourage terrorism in our country, extremism, but you do not want to accept that there are terrorists, indigenous terrorism inside your country. When we have been...
Okay, since that's a charge, I'm going to let Sebastian Farces respond and then I'll wrap up. Sebastian.
I do understand that there is, I mean, we have two different issues here. One is integration, and we have an issue of integration of Muslim immigrants and son of immigrants from the Arab world, especially from North Africa. And that's a big issue that creates, like in the UK, radicalization because of problem of identity of Muslim descendants. But that's nothing to do with what is the depiction of the Prophet today and the freedom of expression. There's nothing to do with that. Again, we don't see any protests today, and the radicalization and the reason why Muslims of France go to Syria to fight jihad, I don't think they would say it's because Charlie Hebdo depicted the Prophet. I mean, let's be clear. There is a social deeper problem, integration, economical upheaval of this community, but it's nothing to do with the depiction again.
Okay, Sebastian Farces, Aparajita Sarangi, Wail Awad, Maulana Fayaz Barkati, Ilyas Shafruddin for joining me on the Newstrack. Thank you very much and a happy Eid. And I just hope that on Eid and every day we learn to respect each other, learn to respect the law. If the law allows for freedom of expression in the way that it does in France, and if there is no blasphemy law, you can protest. Most certainly you can protest. But that protest must be non-violent. Nothing and no one gives you the right to start beheading someone, attacking someone or killing someone. And if you do, and if you want to protest that action, you have to protest against the beheading, against the killing, against the attacks, rather than the other way around. Earthquake of 7.0 has hit Greece and Turkey, causing buildings to collapse in a sea surge that flooded streets in the Turkish resort city of Izmir. Greek public television said that the quake also caused a mini tsunami on the island of Samos, damaging buildings. At least 4 people have died and over 120 people have been injured. This is where I wrap up the Newstrack tonight. For your time and your trust, thank you. Goodbye.